Prayer disrupts. Prayer invades. Prayer manipulates. Those are all the consequences of prayer. Now, let me repeat that. Prayer disrupts. Prayer manipulates. Prayer invades. When people think of prayer, they don't think about all of these things. Now, let me explain. Let's say that you have a man, an old man who's in his 70s, who has some cancer. Now, then you have a grandchild that goes to church and he asks for prayer for his grandfather who has cancer, terminal cancer. So people at the church, a group of like 8 or 10 people, they begin to pray. Not just prayer, citing verses, they decree health. They deal with the stronghold of sickness concerning that grandfather. And they keep doing it. So, spiritually speaking, the stronghold of sickness is removed and the tension is removed from the body and the cancer disappears. So, the grandson, in this case later, tells the people at church that it worked. His grandfather is completely healed physically. The cancer's gone. Now, what's the disruption here? That grandfather used to be, well, he used to be a man with a temper in his young years. He did not violently attack anyone, but people had a bad view of him. People used to talk bad about him. People didn't like him. And you know what? That guy, he got married, he had children, nevertheless, despite everything. The descendants of his peers also couldn't stand the guy. Why? Because the peers of that grandfather talked bad about that man. Let's call the man Fred. They talked bad about Fred, so everyone in that neighborhood had a bad attitude towards Fred. And people didn't want to admit their violence towards Fred. So when Fred was dying, they felt relief. They thought, well, he's old and he has cancer, so he will be gone soon. Now hold on a minute. The prayers that people prayed on behalf of Fred, not only was the cancer gone, Fred was also delivered. Fred also had new strength. So Fred began to preach the gospel. And Fred began to reach people where he was at an old age. Fred's body even began to, how do they say it, rejuvenate itself. His body began to renew itself. So he began to look younger than he was. He used to have gray hairs, but now his hairs began to have color again. So when this was happening, people were frightened. Especially people that had a bad attitude towards Fred. What has happened? The prayer invaded their environment, because Fred was in their environment. That faith that people had, those prayers disrupted their expectations. Those prayers manipulated the circumstances, because not only was Fred alive, the cancer was gone, but he was also influential. And people who didn't want him to be influential, people that didn't want anything to do with him, they don't have to face the influence of Fred. So when they became annoyed, they began to become, when they became irritated at Fred's influence, it was them carrying all that weight with them. They had sleepless nights, they had irritation issues. So prayer invaded, manipulated, and disrupted. Now look, if this grandson and those people at the church would have listened to what the world is saying, the world tells you not to manipulate, to respect people's boundaries, and to never force people to do things against their will, and to respect other people's wishes, especially people's boundaries. If they would have followed the world, that friend would have died. And people would be in grief. Some people, of course. But now they agreed with Christ and they prayed in agreement with Christ and things happened. Disruption happened, invasion happened, manipulation happened. Look, in the paranormal, you also have a type of prayer. You have Buddhists that pray, Hindus that pray, you have Taoists, I believe, also pray. So in the prayer normally also pray. And also there, those prayers, they invade, they disrupt, and they manipulate. And you know what? When pagans pray, they don't care about the so-called boundaries of the world because they realize that those boundaries are part of the problem. But yet you have believers that are so concerned with the expectations of others. Look, there's nothing wrong with if there's nothing wrong with considering the expectations of others when those expectations are legitimate. It goes too far when people exalt the so-called free will of men above the will of the Father. I mean, look, there are people that expect you to be an easy victim, to allow yourself to be accursed, to allow yourself to perish just to keep society at ease. There are even people that expect you to comply with the scapegoating of others just to have so that the community is at ease. Look, so you mean to tell me that if people agree negative towards you, you are going to take that negativity and bear it as a good citizen just so that they are at ease, so that they are not offended? Are you out of your mind? If you think like this, then you might as well allow people to sexually molest you, so to give them relief. Why even bother to walk by faith if you have to always unconditionally honor the expectations of others, which is an impossible thing to do? Look, when you go to a kitchen to cook, you manipulate the ingredients to get a dish. Okay, when you bake a cake, you manipulate the ingredients. That's how people make bread. And people eat bread daily. When you dress up to go outside, you manipulate. Why? You want your body to remain warm. So if it's cold, you put on a jacket. That's a form of manipulation. Because outside it's cold, but you use textile to keep yourself warm. When you say hello, good morning, when you are polite, you are manipulating. You are contributing to a warm, welcoming environment to avoid contention. So everyone manipulates. The thing is, why are they manipulating? That's a whole nother thing. So listen, when you are at home and praying, you are invading, you are manipulating, and you are disrupting. Get used to it. Just be in agreement with Christ. That being said, be at peace.